Guys, today we're looking at another retro handheld, the Powkiddy X28 retro handheld gaming console, provided to me for review by mechdiy.com. I'll have an affiliate link down below if you do want to purchase this device for $169.99. There's also a 15% coupon going at time of recording, so you might want to jump on that. If we scroll down, we'll take a look at some of the specifications here. We do have that same T618 processor. We've seen a lot of these handhelds, 5.5-inch 720p IPS touchscreen, a 5,000 milliamp hour battery that should last, over 5 hours, I think is about right for what I've been experiencing, so that's pretty decent. And of course, it is running a little bit old at this point, but better than I think a lot of the other operating systems, at least for my money, Android 11. So with all that out of the way, let's take a look at the hardware itself. So this is the Powkiddy X28, and I must admit that when I pulled this thing out of the box, I was very pleasantly surprised. I do really like the overall form factor of this thing. It kind of almost reminds you of a slightly angular, smaller baby version of the Steam Deck. And yes, I do mean a baby version of the Steam Deck. It is absolutely dwarfed by the deck. Up front, we have that 5.5-inch 720p display. We have a D-pad, joystick, base buttons over here, another joystick, and then I like the fact that we have Android controls. Home, back, this would be like your multitasking button, if I'm remembering correctly. And then this G button, I thought would maybe be like Google Assistant or something interesting like that, but it's actually for their game overlay. It loads up their little overlay, which I'll take a look at here in a minute as well. Start, select. We have shoulder buttons here and there, volume, power, an SD card slot, USB-C for power, USB-C for OTG, and then HDMI, as well as a 3.5mm headphone jack. On the back side, not a whole lot, just this interesting little emblem type thing. I thought that this was like a fan grill for like active cooling, but it doesn't go anywhere. It's just like a texture. On the bottom and on the sides, not a whole lot going on. So that's pretty much the device. If we hit the power button and fire it up, yes, that is indeed the multitasking button. We're going to go back home. This is the launcher that it comes with, and I believe it is called, yes, Game Launcher. It's very, very basic. You can kind of put things into these different folders. You have a tool section for like a file browser, gallery underneath, entertainment video. You can see though, it is pretty janky. Entertainment video as one word. The controls up here, it just all looks a little bit not super well polished, maybe you could say. List of apps and then settings here. Maybe the most useful thing in this is that you can change handheld mode from PS3 to Xbox, although I've not really found any like good reason to do that. What I did is I immediately went and installed a different launcher. And I'll show you a couple of options here really quickly. So Console Launcher is a third-party launcher that I think works really, really well. You can see here you've got different folders, and of course this is all D-pad usable. Did you hear how loud that face button was just then? We're going to talk about that here in a minute as well. And this does work quite nicely. List of all your apps down here, browser, Play Store, pretty solid. If we jump back in here though, you can also use Daijasho, I think that's how that's pronounced, and this is great if all you're really doing is running emulators. I'm not going to do like a full setup on this, but you can see how well that works. You can jump in, there's your list of games. It's actually going to grab artwork for some of them, and they're going to fire up and play. So that's a pretty useful home application. Bare minimum, just don't use the one that it comes with. You could also just change it to Quick Step, which is basically like a super basic Android launcher. That's probably the worst of your options. I'd go with either Console Launcher or Daijasho. For this, we're just going to stick with Console Launcher. And let's start talking about the rest of this hardware, because I've got some problems here. Maybe you heard that face button just a second ago. Occasionally, when I go to press one of these buttons, the A button in particular, it's just really loud. It's quiet now. Actually, I see what's happening now. The B key is getting stuck. Watch this. It doesn't come up all the way. This might be really hard to see, but that B key is actually stuck down at a weird angle. So when I press A, it just released it. That's what that noise is. So there's some jank with the face buttons. With the D-pad, you do occasionally have a situation where you can be pressing down and you're getting a left diagonal or a right diagonal, or you're hitting left and getting a down diagonal. Sometimes they just kind of pick up diagonals when you're not meaning to use them. And the sticks just don't feel particularly accurate. There's not a ton of room for travel. And in particular, in games where you are mapping your controls to a touch point on the screen, they do some really weird things, which I'll just jump in and show you really quickly. So as we go into matchmaking here for Call of Duty Mobile, we can press that button. And what you have here is the ability to place these keys wherever you need them to be to kind of line up with where there are touch targets on the screen. This one is for the right stick. Watch what happens when I try to move it by pressing directly left. It's going left and up, right? And now if I go back into the game and I try to simply turn left, left and up. Let's try looking directly right. Again, right and up. So it kind of makes the right joystick, in particular when you are trying to map it to things in games like this, almost useless. Watch how difficult it is for me to play this game because I'm constantly having to correct for this by sort of pressing down. I can't simply look to my left or right. It's always left or right and slightly down. It makes it almost impossible to play. And unfortunately, if I jump into like PUBG Mobile, it's the same thing here. So this is not like a game-specific thing. You know, you wish that this would work well, but it just doesn't. So if you're buying this thing with the aim of, you know, playing some of these Android games and using these overlaid controls, it's just not going to work that well. But here's what's really strange. If I jump into Minecraft that has controller support, I do not have this issue. Here I am in Minecraft. Let's look directly left. Let's look directly right. This is why I don't think that this is like a hardware problem. I think that this is a software problem. I don't think my joystick is broken. I think that their software is broken. Minecraft is a good demo for this though, because honestly, it works pretty well, about as well as you would hope that it would. It runs quite nicely, and this is a pretty cool experience at that point. Are the sticks the most accurate things in the world? No, they're definitely not, but this is not like a, you know, like a fast-paced shooter, so you should be more or less okay. While we're talking about the controls though, let's talk about the triggers, because I just don't really like the way they feel either. The bumpers, or the shoulder buttons, have a very small amount of travel, which is, you know, whatever, neither good nor bad. But the triggers themselves, they require more force than I would like, and they almost like stick. I just really don't like the way that these controls feel, honestly, guys. None of these buttons, the sticks, the D-pad, the triggers, just none of them feel good to me. And that makes this thing such a pain to use when compared to some other devices. There are situations where it's going to work quite well, like Minecraft. And like, you know, some of these emulators we're going to look at here in a minute, it does okay. But this thing is also $160. Okay, so let's move on. Let's take a look at some emulation here. Let's do one that I think it does really well. How about going into PSP? And we are playing some Vice City stories, and it's going to do this fantastically. PSP games, really, really good. It's basically like a giant PSP with like a nicer screen. So, you know, there are definitely some use cases for this thing. You're going to potentially be able to have a lot of fun with certain games like this. And I do really like the fact that we have physical keys for things like back, because that lets me get into menus like this really, really quickly. You can see you're actually running 4x native resolution, which is 1080p, and this is actually a 720p screen, so it probably isn't even benefiting me in any way. So there are some good things here. Let's take a look at maybe pushing this thing a little bit harder. If we jump up to GameCube, I think what you'll see is pretty much the extent of what this thing is capable of. Now, I am actually running the Dolphin MMJR version of the emulator, and as you can see, it does okay. But if you're kind of expecting to be able to run, you know, every GameCube game, that's probably not going to happen. Most games are going to require a little bit of tweaking. Some are going to work quite well. Some are going to run better on the official Dolphin emulator. Some are going to run much better on MMJR. It's really just going to come down to kind of a ROM by ROM type situation. So again, don't buy this thing expecting GameCube to be all that playable. What you should be expecting to be having a lot of fun with are the lower end stuff, right? PSP, N64, Saturn, these older consoles, these are going to run quite well. And then, of course, Android games that do have controller support are going to run quite well, with the exception being, you know, anytime you're trying to map this right stick to a place on the screen, you're probably not going to enjoy that very much. Let's jump into an N64 game real quick just for some additional testing. Let's do Mario 64. We'll just resume where I was playing the other day. And what you'll see here is that this does run pretty much flawlessly. So as a retro handheld, something that you're going to be playing these older games on, I think it's going to do really quite well. But again, I kind of would ask, why are you choosing to go with this one that does have the deficiencies that it has while you are sort of paying the price that you are paying? There are systems in existence like the Retroid Flip here that also runs Android, that has the same chipset, so same levels of performance, but it also has controls that I think just feel so much better. And you know, I get that this is not a real stick, it's a slider, but I swear I would prefer to use these sliders over the sticks on this thing. I mean, I guess the screen size is a little bit better on the Powkiddy device, but there are just other devices out with so much better controls than what you're getting here. And in fact, they can be the same price, if not cheaper. Let's take a look at some other things you could do on this thing that, you know, it's Android, so you could fire up YouTube. Improvement worth purchasing. Before we jump into the, you know, you could do something like that pretty decently. What about music? We can use this as a test of the speakers, which, might I tell you, they do get very, very loud, but they do distort quite a bit at higher volumes. But this will be, if nothing else, a nice test for the speakers. They're not the worst speakers I've ever heard, but they, like I said, they definitely do distort at higher volumes. But you can install Android apps, right? You have access to the Play Store, so you can download multimedia apps and do that type of thing as well. It even does have the capability of rotating, like if you're playing something like Pocket City, which I've not actually even tested on here yet, but there's no reason that it would not work. You can see here it's totally capable of being rotated. So there's lots of options for different things that you can do here. Something else to think about too, though, is the fact that you can run something like the Xbox Game Pass application and actually stream console quality games to this device. Let's see if we can get something like Starfield up and streaming. Of course, this sometimes takes a second. Sometimes their servers are all full and you might have to kind of wait a minute. Hopefully in this instance, that's not the case and we should be launching directly in. I'll skip ahead to where we're actually playing. You can see how well this works. As this is loading in, I did want to make a couple of other quick points. One, I talked about battery life, but I didn't talk much about charging. When you're charging this device, you're going to need to plug it into basically an older charging brick. If you are using one of these newer PD-compatible charging bricks, in my experience, it may not actually want to charge at all. So definitely keep that in mind. You can see here, I have a pretty fast, fiber internet connection, so, keep that in mind. But you could absolutely play some games this way. Once you get used to the latency that you're going to be seeing, like I just failed to do there by spinning too far, you may find yourself actually having some fun. That's something I did not expect to happen. This thing may not have full controller support with this. All the other controls seem to work out of the box. The bumpers are working, but I cannot actually fire any of these weapons. So, not great there either. Something else that I think I also want to point out is there are haptics. It does vibrate in certain instances. And the haptics do work decently well, but they are very loud. See if you can hear this. Just a little annoying. And just to be clear here, that is not a problem with this device. That seems to be something exclusive to the X28. I just think that overall, as a total package and for this price, there might be some better options out there. Something like I just mentioned, the Retroid Pocket Flip. Let's go with the indigo color that I got. $159, and it's got software to map controls for Android games, and trust me, it works without any of the issues we're seeing on the X28. It's the same chipset, but it's actually got active cooling, so it might perform a little bit better than that. In fact, if I remember correctly, in GameCube games, it did perform a little bit better than that. The controls are better, unless you're just in love with this form factor. You just really want this form factor, and you're not concerned with Android games. You just want to play the retro games like I'm talking about. Basically, GameCube is so-so and down. Anything below that, it's going to handle pretty much flawlessly. It's got a big screen. It's a nice screen. you just have to know what you're getting into when you purchase this thing. Again, guys, I'm going to drop a link in the description down below. If you want to check it out, you can do so, and you'll help support the channel by using that link. I'll go ahead and put this in a playlist with other handheld reviews, and maybe I'll drop a link to the review of the Pocket Flip in case you want to check that out as well, because personally, if I'm picking between the two, that's the direction I'm probably going in. Once again, though, thanks to Mech DIY for sending this thing over for me to review. As always, they are seeing this review at the exact same time as all of you. They have no editorial input, no early copy, no money changed hands for the production of this review. They simply sent me the thing, and here's what I thought of it. Subscribe for more content just like this, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.